So
All right.
today we have a very special guest known for his iconic scores for obviously the Terminator, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, True Lies, a favorite of mine, Johnny Mnemonic, Mr. Brad Fiedel.
Fiedel. Yeah.
Damn it.
Nobody gets that right.
Damn it. Everyone keeps saying Fidel.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you.
I have people I've known for years that, it's Fiedel or Fiddle, or there's this hesitation like, okay, how do I pronounce F-I-E? If you're German, it's actually Fiedel. But
Okay.
I'm not German, so somewhere along the line, someone decided it was Fiedel.
Yeah, Fidel. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? Fidel.
It does.
I almost changed the spelling in my old Hollywood days for different press things where I thought, if I spell it F-Y-D-E-L-L, people will say it right.
Yeah. I can see
Well,
that.
I said it badly, so
no problem. We can all tell by your skin tone you're not feeling well, so you have an excuse.
Yeah, well, I haven't been out. It's like 3 months. 3 months I haven't been out yet. So.
Wow. So
I'm hoping to get some of that sun soon. It looks like you've had a lot of sun now.
We're lucky. We're lucky. My wife and I are isolated. We are making some forays to a few stores that handle the situation really well and limit the people. But we're lucky to be here in California, and we have a garden, so we are outside. I have to actually walk down a path from my house to where the studio is in a separate building. So that's sometimes my only air for the day.
Oh, because I was going to mention what would your daily routine be through this, troubling time at the moment, and how is it different from obviously previously? It's obviously much.
Well, previously, first of all, I was actually supposed to be in London right now. What is today?
The 3rd.
Yeah, I was supposed to be in London from the 21st of May till the 8th. I would probably be in Scotland right now, just being a tourist.
Scotland.
We were supposed to have the Royal Albert Hall Terminator live show last Thursday.
Okay.
And it was pretty funny. My calendar alert went off on my phone saying you need to go to the sound check.
Oh.
And
did you go? No.
I wish. We, both because it was, I'm looking at pictures of that place. I've never actually been inside. I've been around it and across the street in the music place where there's studios downstairs under the Royal, I don't know what the official name is, Royal Academy of Music, Royal
Academy
place,
yeah.
But they have some high-tech studios in the basement, and we did some of our meetings down there when I would come to London and help them fine-tune the sounds for the show. And anyway, it's a disappointment. Wow, I probably would have been shaking in my boots. I was supposed to come out and play the theme on a grand piano, take questions and answers, and then go into my seat in the audience.
You're allowed to play now if you want, if you really want to.
No, that's
do a live show. So how do you keep busy, and because of what's happened and things have been cancelled, how do you keep positive?
Well,
and what have you been up to?
What really was a lifesaver for me, because I am a bit of a, I don't know what you'd call it, not necessarily type A, but I like to be active and productive. I'm not really good at vacations and relaxing. So when I learned how to surf in the early 2000s, I became a bit of a surf bum for a while, but that didn't last very long. And then I decided, I really like this. So I designed and built a little hotel on the coast of Mexico so I could afford to have my own private surf retreat, but also rent out to other people. So now, usually it's late for me. I'm a dawn patrol surfer. So that means paddling out into the ocean at very first light before it gets windy and crowded. So many days I would get up early and go out and surf and then come back home usually by 9 or 10 o'clock and do the rest of my day.
Have you ever met any like dangers? So like,
I get hit embarrassingly by my own board and broke my nose one day.
Ouch.
And had to go to the I came out of the water and I was probably in a little bit of shock, and I think my nose was like over here somewhere. And my buddies on the beach, like I was feeling like I tried to breathe in and out through my nose, and this is like a horror movie, but they basically say, no, don't do that, because I get bubbles of blood were coming out through the hole.
Gosh.
This is
nice.
a great way. Great way,
Brad Fiedel, bloody everywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, so that would be my normal day. But when this all happened, and it became clear that we needed to basically just stay at home, that's when this piece of work that requires a lot of focus and a lot of hours and time, which is putting together an audio version of my original musical Full Circle.
Yes.
That had been sitting kind of on my to-do list for quite a while. And I had most of the elements, but it's kind of technical, but I had designed what would be called an audio version of a staged reading, which is simply all the voices and the dialogue and just a solo piano. And it's a way that when you're developing a show, you keep it simple, because if you're going to go into a room and kind of in a workshop kind of way show it to people, you just have one pianist, So I had to develop a version of the show for single solo piano. So that's what I had. And so what I had to do is reorchestrate. But just to take a step back, I had the realization that this was the time to do it, because between our business in Mexico and our daughter in London, it seems like we're always coming and going and in transition. And I needed the kind of focus that doesn't allow. So it's something that had been waiting for quite a while. And I've been working on this musical off and on for over 10 years, actually. I went back, I was kind of horrified. I went back to do some research to find some old idea that wasn't in the present show. And things are coming up on my screen. And I think the date on that was 2007 or 2008. That was just early. Wow, what about a story that goes like that? Just early thoughts.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got in there and I reorchestrated the whole piece, which means that all these piano and vocal songs had accompaniment, with, of course, with samples. I'm alone in the studio, so with samples of strings and whatever else was appropriate. I also underscored some of the dramatic moments, because it's kind of like a radio show. You have to sit there and imagine it on the stage, or imagine it in the world, like as if it were a film.
Yeah.
We didn't do sound effects, but there's all the actors' dialogue, so you get the whole story. Occasionally, if there's what we call a stage direction, something that's in a script that describes something visual that's happening, that is there. I brought in a professional narrator to narrate those pieces sporadically, so you're kind of oriented to, okay, what am I imagining I'm seeing right now? So it was great, and I had some pros look at it and listen to it. See, I'm still saying look. Say, hey, did this work for you? And they said, yeah, it actually works great as an audio experience. And so I went ahead and completed it, polished it, mixed it. I mean, it's still not what I would necessarily release as an album or whatever.
Yeah.
But I really thought it was the time, with everybody kind of stuck, to share it. I just wanted to share it with everybody, because it's kind of weird working on something for many years, a work of art, whatever you want to call it, a work of entertainment, a work of theater, and working at it and stepping away and coming back. Because I wrote the book, meaning the script, which is all the dialogue and all the imagination of the locations and all that, and the music and the lyrics, which is kind of unusual. And I didn't do it out of a sense of ego. I did it out of a sense of I had a vision, and I didn't have anybody available to me to collaborate with that I felt it would take longer to explain to them what I wanted. So I'd written scripts before and played with writing and different things. So I just jumped in. So it's all me.
Cool.
All me if you want to applaud, all me if you want to boo, all me if you fall asleep while listening to it, which I doubt will happen.
It doesn't matter
Yeah.
about that, as long as you finished it and you know got it, you did it.
I did it and got it out there, and
done it.
Great.
there's a few early kind of press versions that have gone out for for people to listen, and the feedback's been really made me feel great. And
Yeah,
the public release, and it'll be on all platforms, is June 24th.
Cool.
And if you follow
So-
my Facebook page, just Brad Fiedel, my musician page, and I guess my daughter's helping me with all the Instagram stuff. Anyway, there's Instagram stuff going up as well.
Yeah, cool. I was gonna ask about that. How would people find the musical if they wanted to listen?
Yeah, well, Full Circle, the musical, will be available on SoundCloud, and that's free. It'll be available on, I believe, all platforms.
Cool.
So depending on how you like to listen.
Yeah.
So that's the long answer to what my days have been looking like.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting now is I finished that process. That process really kept me sane because I had to get up in the morning. I had a job,
Yeah.
Now my job is I'm creating occasional posts or my press person taps on my shoulder in a sense digitally and says I need something, so I try to think of some either old story or something related. Of course, we get a lot of reaction and appreciation for anything to do with the Terminator films. And I'm hoping that a lot of those people will have an open mind and decide to see what I'm up to lately and check out the musical.
Yeah, because it's different from that, isn't it? And
it's totally.
You want to be known for different things and not just the Terminator, yeah?
And the thing is, I don't really care that much. I've gone through phases, Hollywood has that thing we call pigeonholing. So I did get a little bit of that, but before that happened, I got to work. There's a wide variety of scores out there.
Mm-hmm.
So of mine. So I really, I got to a point where I was kind of grumpy about being known as the Terminator guy. And then I realized, hey, that has given me a platform. Plus,
if I had that, I'd use it to my advantage. I'd just
Totally. And plus, that was done such a long time ago. Social media didn't really exist. And over the years, and especially recently with these posts that I'm doing, I had no idea really what that music meant to people. I knew the film was a popular film and almost retroactively more appreciated as time goes by because the sequels, quite frankly, didn't live up to what Mr. Cameron achieved. And what I didn't really get was the music itself really, it meant something to people. I get kind of worried when I hear people say they're listening to it in their car or I'm seeing all this road rage potential out there.
I know.
I really don't think, I probably wouldn't sit and listen to that particular music, maybe the theme, but the action cues and stuff is not something I would listen to.
What kind of music would you be listening to?
Well, this is sad. My wife will tell you very little.
Yeah.
And I actually, it's kind of like, what they say, the shoemaker's family that don't have their any shoes.
Yeah.
So I finally did break down and got this little system around the house. So it's actually a local company in Santa Barbara, but they're called Sonos, and they have a cool digital format to connect their little speakers and everything. But I think it's not that uncommon. There are some musicians that listen like crazy, and they're like music historians. They can tell you everything about everything. And I'm more the guy that's kind of imagining things in my head, and they've done brainwave tests, and I guess they put people in scanners and stuff, and they've seen that musicians' brains activate a different part of the brain when they're listening to music than a normal listener. and therefore it's not really that relaxing to me most of the time.
Yeah,
Not all the time.
I could understand that because my father who does sporting events, like he records it for TV.
Mhm.
He says he can't really watch hockey live because he's being super critical with everything that he's seeing on TV.
Wrong camera.
Yeah, no, switch to number 2. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, but you know what's interesting about it is that people ask me to get very specific about scores I appreciate, you know, and what's out there lately. And the fact is that I love the movies, and that's really what pulled me into my career. I happen to have an ability to translate images and stories into some kinds of different sounds and music that seem to support it. So that was an ability I had that kind of got me in the door to be part of filmmaking teams. But when I go and see a film, it's like I have this muscle almost not to really listen to the score apart from the experience of the whole film. I really just want to be the audience. So I haven't lost that. That would have been really sad. But I have, you know, I really like to listen to, let's see, what have I put on recently? Well, there are times where where I'm alone in the house and I want to have some company, and I'll often put on Pandora tuned to a comedy, like George Carlin. You know, I love his stuff, or Richard Pryor or whatever. You know, just to get me out of my own head. But if I'm going to put up music, it's just almost anything. It'll be Aretha Franklin, Van Morrison. You know, that whole thing is really near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
I don't like most quote new age music, you know, like the music that whenever I go get a massage, I ask, please don't put it on, you know, this kind of.
What is the new music they have at massage places?
You know, they used to call it new age. I guess it's kind of
just pop.
It's meant to be relaxing. That's the whole point.
Yeah, right? It's kind of like meditation elevator music.
Okay.
Sometimes it has a spiritual element, and there might be a woman's voice in it. Yeah. You know, there are some kind of out there, like, I don't know if you guys know Dead Can Dance.
I've never heard of it.
There are bands that have taken really interesting, different cultural, whether it's Indian or Eastern, and they've woven into this kind of world.
Made it interesting, yeah.
What?
Made it interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, some of that I actually enjoy sometimes, but anyway, I don't listen a lot. And my wife and I, you know, she once in a while I've tried to open up because I'm not writing right now. That's when I can be more forgiving of playing music in the house, but music as a background to life, something that doesn't work for me very much.
All right, so we actually have a question from the Twitch chat, one of the viewers. It says, hello Brad, Daniel Becker here. Do you consider re-recording some of your lost scores, like Fright Night 2 for release? It would be great if you could release a re-recording or a new suite based on the themes that you wrote to that movie. Unfortunately had never had a soundtrack release. So much great music there.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it. And that request does come up. We even had trouble finding when they did a release, I don't know, sometime in the recent history, I mean, in this century, they did a re-release of the Fright Night score, and they had to kind of cobble that together from some stuff. I tried to give them whatever I had, but they're just, you know, these things were recorded in a time before digital. So therefore, they were on analog tape of one sort or another. My stuff was recorded on the stuff like those films where it's done in my own studio. They were recorded on 2-inch analog tape, 24 tracks.
Yeah.
And that stuff didn't survive very well. There was a point where they were resurrecting the original Terminator for MGM did a wonderful restoration because that film was originally in mono. And they had a fake stereo, but they never really had a true spatial mix. So we wanted to go back and do the music from the get-go, back to my old 24 tracks. And they had to do this whole, they call it baking the tapes. They had to do a whole process with those tapes to make them usable. Then they immediately transferred it to digital files. And then we worked with the digital, because once they did this, I don't even think the tapes were playable more than once. So it was really like a archaeological dig where you're brushing through the dirt trying not to break anything, So yeah, truthfully, I really love that people appreciate that, and I'm discovering more and more that they are.
Yeah.
But I don't really have I don't have the ability. I don't have files that translate into today in order to do a revamp of Fright Night 2. I'm not sure. It wasn't my decision whether or not to do soundtrack albums. It was usually between the record company and the film company. They would make some kind of deal, and then I would deliver a stereo master. But back then, there were certain films that didn't happen. Then there's certain films where I guess they have made albums of that I was kind of surprised, frankly. But sorry to say, there's no plans or really a feasible way. To be really frank about it, I would have to go through the film with a fine-tooth comb and literally recreate the compositions and then recreate a way to record them. It's like a huge project, and life is short.
Yeah.
And we've got another question here real quick. Brad, is the musical related to your grandfather's life? Fred was a musician like you. Your dad, Ivan, was even composing material, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Is Ivan also an influence in the setting / characters?
Interesting point. I don't know who that question's coming from, but they actually know something about my family background.
Their username is Super Turricon.
Okay. Anyway, cool question. I come from many generations of musicians, just going way back to Eastern Europe. And the thing about my grandfather is that there's an element of the story of things that really happened to him, which I totally fictionalized. But there's an element of the story that intrigued me, and he's something that relates to his historical experience is incorporated in the story, but it's really just was the germ of an idea that then I fictionalized and took in a whole different direction. So it's really not fair to say it was based on his life. And unfortunately, the part of his life that is kind of referred to or used as a stimulus for my plot line, I can't talk about because it would be a huge spoiler.
Okay.
So because it's something that's revealed late in the show, and the mystery of his past is actually a big part of the story and what motivates the plot. So, and my dad, Ivan, was such an influence on me. I mean, I literally was, some people say I was raised on his knee. I was raised sitting under his piano as a little kid, crawling around under the piano. And he was a wonderful, very talented musician who really dedicated himself to teaching kids about improvisation and creativity and helping them. He was kind of the opposite of the way a lot of teaching of music is done now, by kind of rote and memorization. And his whole thing, which is so in my heart and soul as a creative person, is that we all have this creative part of our souls, and we just need to kind of liberate it and get away from self-judging so much that we can't express ourselves. So everything I do was influenced by him and my mom and the way that I was raised. This show was not influenced by him, except indirectly, because he wrote a bunch of what I guess would be called operettas for for his students. They had a summer program, and they would put on a show every year. So the spirit of that, I would say, is in there.
Cool. Very
Okay.
nice.
Wow. Yeah. I was wondering about your how you started your career. That's why I wanted to know. When did you decide you wanted to be sort of a musician, an artist, or a film composer? When did it click in your head? You thought, I want to do that.
Well, going back a step to how I was raised, it was always part of me to believe that I had the ability to express myself creatively. I was just raised, it's like growing up with your parents who are athletes, and right from the get-go knowing that you can be strong and you can be athletic or whatever. And so that was always part of me. And I mean, I know I was barely, a toddler or a little bit beyond when I can kind of almost remember it. I wrote this little piece on the piano. So that was always happening. Coming of age in the 60s, the singer-songwriter thing was just kind of starting out, and the Beatles arrived, it was like 64 or whatever. And being not an athlete and in a very kind of straight high school, junior high and high school, I think I decided that the only way I was going to compete to get girls was to do this rock and roll thing.
Had to be done. Had to be done.
Yeah, I mean, how many guys would admit to that? So many, that music at first was a way to get girls. And yeah, so I formed a band, and out of that grew a more artistically mature desire to express and write good songs and be a singer-songwriter. And I was, bopping around the New York music scene and playing and auditioning. I had I don't know if your audience knows who Clive Davis is, but he was one of the biggest executives historically ever in the record business, all the way back to discovering and from Bob Dylan to, whatever. Anyway, bottom line is I had a private audition with him, literally sitting at a piano in his office, because nobody had home studios then. You couldn't make your demo for nothing, So the record company would say, yeah, we like what you're doing. And they would put you in their big studio to record a demo. So I did that a number of times.
Yeah.
Got close, but didn't break through. Again, now it's democratized. People can make their own music and get it out to the public. I mean, notoriously lately, like literally on a laptop in your bedroom.
It's not always great, but they're doing it.
Right, exactly. But I had back then, the only way to get your music to the public was to get a deal, a sizable deal, which was a big investment on the part of a major corporation to develop you as an artist and maybe do 3 albums, in 4 years or whatever the deal would be. And so that I never kind of made it to the top of the heap on that thing.
Yeah.
And I did end up, it wasn't really my intent, but a friend said, you got to go down to Studio Instrument Rentals, where they had all these rehearsal stages in New York, rehearsal rooms, and audition. And, he was like, he was in the scene. I was kind of off to the side of the scene, and he was seeing the postings for the need for keyboard players.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, back then, as absolutely nobody, I mean, all I had to do was sign up on a list. And then I was jamming for 15 minutes with Bruce Springsteen as they were trying to decide.
That's awesome.
Who they were going to pick. They didn't pick me, but the next week, my friend said, "Oh, there's this band, Hall Oates, and they're looking." And I went down and I got that gig, and I played with them for about 6 months, and I got a real life experience of what it was to be a touring musician.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, it didn't really feel, it wasn't a natural for me.
No.
And right around the same time, now I had written a little bit for some little educational films. So that was like the first inkling where somebody paid me to write music for their particular little project. I mean, these were small things. These were little films that they would show in the classroom. You know, they weren't like released on media. But hey, I got paid, and I got to write a variety of background scoring and some cute little songs to help the kids talk about the issue at hand. You know, whether it be bullying or what is it like to move into a new neighborhood and make new friends. You know, it's almost like mini. There were mini shown in the classroom Sesame Streets or something. You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so I had that, but that was like, okay, that'll keep me going and pay the rent a little bit, but I still want to be a rock star. Then it started to shift when I got to play with Hall & Oates, and at the same time, a friend of mine did this offbeat, low-budget New York independent film, and he asked me to write the music. So that was the crossover. I came in from the road, having been out with Hall & Oates. That tour was ending. At the same time, this particular film did need this scene accompanied that was dancing in the streets of New York. And instead of putting together a band, I thought, hey guys, you know, I said to Daryl and John, you want to play on this movie score? So they came in. So they came in at Union Scale, which was quite a coup. And that sequence is played by the Daryl Hall John Oates band jamming on that film. But then from then on, it was film for me. I kind of crossed over and was just scrounging around New York and doing some small independent films. Decided that most of the action was happening in Hollywood, moved out to LA, you know, so it went.
Cool. And like, whenever you first started with Hall & Oates, did you realize how big they actually were, or?
No, you know, it's kind of a parallel to doing the first Terminator, where people say, did you know what that, you know?
Yeah.
Now I got that he was one of the first directors that ever described what he had on film to me, then showed me the film, and it was there. Can't tell you how many directors you sit in a meeting and they talk and know all this stuff about their film, and then you see the film and go, okay, well, he didn't quite get that on the screen. But anyway, Hall & Oates were in a bit of a they were, how to describe this? They had one hit at the moment I was with them called She's Gone, but it was recorded by a group called Tavares, not by them. But they had a following, and they had done this great album produced by Arif Mardin, who was Aretha Franklin's producer.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they had a following, mostly on the East Coast, wasn't huge, but it was, they had a lot of promise. And then being artists, Daryl, I think especially, but John as well, had a desire not to be put in a box.
Yeah.
So they did this album called War Babies, which was kind of a concept album. And it was produced by Todd Rundgren, and the fans got pissed. You know, it's kind of like me saying to Terminator fans, listen to my musical, and there, you know, some people are going to listen to that and go, "No, this isn't what I like about this guy." Yeah. Well, that's what it was. That's what it was for Daryl and John. They were basically had their wrists slapped for trying to break out of the box, which I think is too bad. And yet, look at their catalog that they created when they moved on from that. So that was we were on a tour, and we were doing some stuff from More Babies and some of their Blue-Eyed Soul stuff. But the idea was to kind of get the fans back. So we did mostly the Blue-Eyed Soul stuff. And that we came back into New York. It was specifically planned to do a show at the Bottom Line that was an industry show, because they were pissed at Atlantic Records and they wanted to move on. And that's when they signed to RCA. I went my way. I mean, I was not an integral part of that band. I played keyboards on one 6-month tour, you know. But they were great guys, and I thought their stuff was really tasty, but they really took off when they changed labels and just started to write this stuff that however you critically think of it musically, man, when you hear it, it just, talk about earworms.
Yeah, it works, yeah.
So playing for Hall & Oates, did you only do it for their tours, or did you do like studio?
No, in fact, we were brought on to that tour saying there'll be a record after this, and you guys will get to play on it.
Okay.
But that didn't happen, and that's just the business, you know. And frankly, Daryl's a keyboard player, so in the studio there really isn't necessarily a need. There wasn't a need for me, and frankly, I'm not. You know, I'm a good keyboard player for my stuff. As far as I never considered myself a studio musician.
Okay.
They are, because I've worked with them for years. True studio musicians are just amazing.
Yeah.
They are the best of their instrument, and that's really not me. You know, I use the piano as a tool to create and to express what I want to express, but my chops are not anywhere near as good as some of those amazing keyboard. There's a guy named Mike Lang in Hollywood who I just ran into again recently, and you know, he's one of those guys that he's just such an accomplished. And you can put the most complex piece of music in front of him, and he can kind of look it over, and he can play a you know, a usable take the first time out.
Super Turricon in the chat also says, did Brad meet Todd Rundgren, or does he know him?
No, but he really was somebody I admired for quite a while, and he you know, like, he was way ahead of his time, and I don't remember. I can't quote albums or even specific songs, but he went in. He took a 24 track and some basic equipment into a room somewhere, and he made an album way before people were doing that kind of thing.
He loved his technology, didn't he?
Yes,
using his
he did.
technology.
He did, and he did a thing that I believe was all him. You know, he's got a lot of different talents, and he, you know, he was someone that really impressed me, and maybe in its own way, in my subconscious, imprinted the idea that a musician could layer themselves and get a full version of what they're hearing in their imagination without necessarily having to have other musicians there. There's good and bad about that. You know, I really love my collaboration with great musicians, and they've been very important. My friend Ross Levinson, who plays the electric violin on a number of my scores, I always look forward. You know, I had an idea of what I wanted as the composer, but he would always bring in something of himself that just took it way beyond, you know, what I would do. So collaboration in music, I think, is really cool. But Todd, man, he was cool. I did not. He was already out of the picture by time we went on that tour, and I don't really know what John and Daryl's relationship was with him ongoing, but he wasn't around.
He's worked with a load of musicians, hasn't he? He's even helped Prince. He helped Prince play the guitar as well, Todd Rundgren. So he's done so many things.
Yeah, and he's somebody who.
Not a lot of people talk about him, like, do they? Todd Rundgren.
No, and he's somebody who really did. Maybe not always to his benefit, at least on a commercial level. And that's the whole thing. This thing about being an artist and this line between commercial and, in a sense, giving the audience what they want versus being an artist and true to your own imagination and your musical or whatever art you're doing soul. That's really, that's been part of my life. That kind of, obviously, I chose Hollywood at one point. I stopped trying to get my own personal songs out there. And I love the idea that millions of people were hearing my music. Though my music, in a sense, was just one element of a larger picture. And eventually, my artist soul said, you know what? You need to do some stuff that's you from beginning to end. Because, and this sounds weird talking to your soul this way, but my soul kind of said to me, you promised. When you were a teenager, that was the whole idea, that music was about what was inside you and sharing it with the world, or kind of grandiose thinking, but sharing it with a person or 6 people in a bar or whoever.
Yeah.
So that's the irony of my title, Full Circle, because full circle actually is, for me personally, full circle, because I'm back to expressing myself directly, which is not what people know me for. And I've done it for years, but frankly, didn't quite figure out how to share it with people within the commercial structure of getting a film made or getting a play on the stage in Broadway. And, this is really cool, because I don't know how many people, but my goal is to have as many people as possible get to experience this other side. And
would you say this is your biggest accomplishment so far? Because it's just you doing it now. It's your own personal project.
I don't know about that. That's hard. I mean, I think someone on the outside would have to make that judgment. For me, it's love the one you're with. If I was creating a film score, that was the most important, best thing I'd ever done. And I had to almost believe that. It's like back to an athlete. You see that bar and you have to get over that bar. That bar, that height is your life at that moment, So yeah, I mean, in a way, it's probably right now, it surely is the most direct, personal, fullest expression of me as an artist. But it's one particular story. It's one group of characters. It's one particular, it's several styles of music woven together. So it's not everything, but right now it's the thing that I'm sharing, and I haven't really had the opportunity to share that part of myself before. So it's a big deal to me,
What's the happiest project you've done, like composing?
Happiest? Wow, that's a really interesting question this, I guess, full circle in a way, because I'm only very difficult, but I'm needing to satisfy myself. Now, I have to be frank that most artists will tell you that satisfying themselves is the hardest thing of any of it. I mean, I can listen to the Terminator scores and tell you exactly what I don't like about what I did, or what was limited because of the time or the technology at the time. And, so I think self-criticism is a good thing for an artist, though not when it ties you in knots. So I've been working on this project. I finally let it go. And part of that process was, you can work this forever and nobody will ever hear it. So I guess the happiest composing for me is to do my own work and kind of let it go, put it out there. As far as film scores go, there are a couple of things that come to mind. There's always a lot of pressure. That's why I kind of laughed at the happy. While you're doing it, there are moments of joy when you're like searching and you find the right sound or the right theme or whatever. There's a thing that I used to say. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but when I was working on films, I had a particular way of working, which was usually to screen the film, go to sleep that night, and just go into the studio and just kind of let things happen. Like, really not be super in control, be loose, sit at the piano or whatever. Comfortable, yeah. But it's comfortable like doing a spacewalk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Comfortable in that you're kind of allowing yourself to jump off the cliff into unknown territory and be comfortable that you're free falling a bit. While meanwhile, there's time pressure. There's people that have expectations. You're the last creative person often on a film. So the whole film is barreling towards release. And if you don't come up with it, that's a big problem, So I have certain memories of certain key things. And ironically, I think it's things that people appreciate looking back at what scores come up for people. They were the scores that actually came the way that I'm describing, as opposed to a director who was very specific, wanted to play me music that he wanted the score to sound like. that was never my strength. There are some composers out there that can take that and run with it in a very constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I needed to go through this process, and it was like I'd be in the studio and I'd play around. There was something would start to gel, and I would hit a point where the hairs on the back of my neck would stand up a little bit, and sometimes tears would come to my eye, like, oh yes, I did it again. Because I never, it was kind of like a magic thing. It's like, wow, is the magic going to happen this time? And I mean that just for me, whether it works for everybody else, but just the fact that I feel like I've been given an assignment, and often the people that, at certain points in my career, the people that came to me appreciated something else that I did, and they wanted that, quote, magic for their film. Something just happened, Charlie.
Yes, sorry, I'm back.
Okay, I was just like,
come on, sorry.
No, it's okay. It could be disconcerting at times. This Zoom stuff. I actually, in this group that I sit with occasionally, where there's like 12 of us, I've learned how to get rid of my view of myself. They can still see me, but it's like, I didn't want to see myself because it was just like, oh, dude, man. Look at this. You're getting really old, dude.
Ooh, no.
I feel like I leapt off and went on a tangent. I just want to go back and just say about Todd, I really think that he was someone that moved through his life following his muse, following what he really wanted to do, because he moved into some areas and people didn't get some of it. He got into some choral stuff and some stuff that, his rabid fans maybe got into, but it didn't get him any, the dollar signs weren't flashing in the eyes of the record business on some of the stuff that he did, which is why his name isn't as well known, but I really,
he's not too gimmicky.
Really
he's not too gimmicky. That's the trouble. But he tried different techniques and ideas, didn't he?
Well, he was always, I feel, kind of a step ahead and expanding the horizons. Even when he did that record where I saw pictures on the album or something of him in this room with this big 24 track and just him and some stuff. Very common now, except it's just a laptop. But back then, that was brave.
Yeah. So,
Andrew.
Yes. So we're just coming up on 45 minutes here. So is there any more questions in the chat that they would like to hear? Because usually in the last 15 minutes we open it up to viewer questions. So if anybody would like to ask a question, they can go ahead now. Did Brad and his wife work on any projects together?
Full Circle.
Okay.
She plays the mom in Full Circle. The one that had the potential to end our marriage was when I brought her on to direct me in my one-man show, Borrowed Time. And that was when I told somebody with experience, they said, "Who's going to direct you?" And I said, "Oh, Anne is going to direct me." And their eyes kind of went wide and went, "Oh, that's interesting." So this was not a biographical piece I did where I play different characters and there's dialogue, but there's also a lot about my history from childhood all the way through the kind of end of my career, and in Hollywood and everything in between and radical politics in the 60s and whatever. So it was my life, and my poor wife, lovely wife Anne, was trying to be a conscientious objector, directing a guy doing his own life. So that was tough. She would tell me, "Hey, you need to smile more. You look like you're worried all the time." She's a wonderful actor. Okay, I mean, she's a very experienced and notable actor.
Oh, she's been in many films. And
yes.
programs.
So anyway, she would tell me something like, "You need to smile more at that moment." I said, "I am smiling." And she said, No, you need to smile like so the audience can tell that you're smiling. Yeah. and then I would just say, "But that's so phony. I don't want to do that." I was so difficult. And then I saw video. Finally, we did some video, and I saw a video of me. I went, "Oh my God, she's totally right on almost every count." So that's when we work together the most. But she and her lovely performance, and she does do a song in Full Circle.
All right, and we have another question here. I've been working on restoring clips from Terminator 3 and Terminator Dark Fate with music from Terminator and Terminator 2. It has overwhelming praise from Terminator Facebook fans through extraction of original sources and unmixing creates sound artifact. I'm using an RX-7 sound editor. Can you recommend any piece of software you think is suitable for the process?
Wow. Okay, so let me make a confession. From like I think I was playing with my first synthesizer in 1966 or something like that. I was actually had the opportunity to get to know a little bit the guy who was Robert Moog's assistant, right? So he was bringing prototypes. So I was playing as a teenager. I was getting to put my hands on the first Mini Moog, and things like that. And all the way through about 1998, I was always on the cutting edge of learning the new programming, learning the new stuff. And then I finally just burned out on it and really ended up doing most of the stuff I've done since Hollywood on acoustic piano and creating it there and then orchestrating it using technology. But I have no clue what's out there right now.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the main difference between Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 in terms of what the limitations were? Time, money, equipment, and how is James Cameron as a collaborator?
Whoa. How much time do we have left?
We've as much time as you need.
Good question. Good question. What's really interesting is I've been promoting this musical. Just again, it's not a financial thing for me. It's just for free. It's just like I want people to share the work. But as I've been doing these interviews and dredging up answers out of my memory for these questions, I've actually had some PTSD dreams.
Oh, wow.
Where it's like what was in junior high, the classic dream is you go to school and look down and realize you forgot to put your clothes on. It's kind of like the Hollywood version of that.
Yeah.
So here we go. I'll do my best. It's a good question, but there's a lot of territory. So I'll try to be kind of succinct, which isn't always my strong point. Technically, there were big differences. So, and I have spoken about it before over the years, but to just put it in a nutshell, Terminator 1, I was kind of creating a way to work before the technology really supported it. So there wasn't this thing called MIDI, which was an early and still somewhat used, though differently, but it was called Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And it was a way that all your equipment could talk to each other so that you could go on a central computer, create a composition, and everything plays on the beat or wherever you decide you want it. I didn't have that. So that was a big limitation. And as they say, sometimes limitations as an artist actually becomes an important part of the art. So some of the eccentricities of the first Terminator score were actually created by that situation. People have discussed for long periods of time and kind of amazes me of what's the time signature of the main theme. And it's an odd time signature because of this little digital loop thing I was using. And if you didn't push the button at exactly the right thing, it was actually looping at not quite 6/8 time.
Yeah.
When I got to T2, everything was talking to itself. It still was difficult. I had 2 Fairlights. I had to program the sustain kind of textural sounds over here and the percussion sound over here. And then I had to link it all together. So it still wasn't nearly as easy as it is now to just go and use Cubase or Digital Performer is the one I often use, and just have this master thing that's telling everybody what to do.
Which was the synthesizer you were using for Terminator? Or
Terminator, I had several things. I had an early, what was that thing called? It was an early sampler, which actually the metal clank was this frying pan distorted into the sampler. I can't remember I'm having a senior moment, but anyway, it was a keyboard that you could have a little cheap mic on and sample sounds into it and play it back. And it had little orchestra hits, which I used, these orchestra hits in the Terminator as well. And I had an Oberheim chain, which was an Oberheim keyboard, an Oberheim little simple sequencer, and an Oberheim drum machine. And a lot of those dun, 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 that stuff was coming from that array, but that array couldn't talk to the Prophet 10, which was doing gong, 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 gong. So those things were like I was constantly, literally holding a dial and it's getting behind and speeding it up. So there's this slight thing to the Terminator 1 score that was actually caused by those limitations, which I think is part of what people, even if they don't understand, they subconsciously like.
Yeah.
Terminator 2, as Jim said to me one day when he came to the studio because they had gone over budget one more time, he said, "This is the most expensive movie ever made, and you're creating the music in your garage." So there was money. I mean, I got decently paid, but I'm just saying the money wasn't for a full orchestra or whatever. It was going a lot into the shoot and all the envelopes that Jim was busting out of visually. Time was the biggest scarcity on T2 because of all the visual effects and how last minute they were coming and all the changes I had to do because I was still recording onto analog tape. So I couldn't do immediate compositional changes on my laptop and then just hit record and re-record the new version that fit the new film. I had to go back and re-record 24 tracks of material after recomposing. So that was crazy. You know, it was a bigger, way bigger film, a very different film. All of a sudden, the guy who was the horror film bad guy was now a good guy, and there's a kid involved, and it was it sounds weird to say it, but it was a warmer film.
Mm-hmm.
It was a more heart film. It was about making you care about the characters and then really, getting you worried about them and then relieving you and getting you worried about them and, all that. But there was a scope to the size of it. And luckily the technology was such with these Fairlights I was using where I could use acoustic based samples and alter them. So underlying even those really kind of cool sustained string sounds, underlying them were actual rosin and bows and strings. So there's this subliminal feeling that it's warmer, that it's more human, that there's more invested. It wasn't in Terminator. Jim just wanted to set a new higher bar as far as action and suspense goes. Mm-hmm. So it was just drive, edgy. He had budgetary limits for the shoot of like $6 million, I think, whereas I think T2 was $100 million. So there was a lot of difference. The music reflects those differences. I think it supports the film well, but I do understand why there are rabid fans of the first one that don't like the second one as much, and vice versa. Second one was way more Hollywood. It just was. And I think I had to support that in a certain way, though he was breaking barriers and I broke some barriers musically. And I think hopefully, was along with him in raising the bar for certain elements of film, of action, of suspense, of science fiction, of time warp, of all the stuff that's in those films.
All right.
So, working with
yes,
him, hold on.
Yeah.
See, I knew this is like an endless question.
Yeah.
Working with him now, I know he has a reputation, and I have to admit that I did see some demonstration of the dark, difficult part of working with James Cameron, but usually 99% that wasn't directed at me.
Yeah.
I didn't witness it directed at others in certain places outside my studio. As far as our relationship and how we work together, it was always, I was just really happy to not be working with a committee and working with someone who not only had a vision, but actually knew how to accomplish that vision. So that established a certain trust. Like there's a thing among composers, give them what they need, not what they want.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a director, producer, whatever, would ask you for something musically for a film, and objectively you could see it wasn't really going to be the best thing for the film. It was coming from some other thing that they were worried about, or that scene never worked right for them on the set, and now they wanted the music to push it in a direction, but it would be too obvious for the audience. So you have to be like this responsible collaborator where you don't say fuck you, but you kind of steer,
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do that when you're working with someone like Jim Cameron, because he understands everything that he's doing and he really knows what he wants. And 90% of the time, my first time out of the box on any given moment, I was really close to what he wanted. And when I wasn't, I trusted, So when he said in T2, I had scored this thing in the Canal Chase, it's this big heavy truck and it's this and it's that. And he went, Brad, I get it. You're doing the truck wrong. I want you to score the scared little boy mouse that's being chased. I want the energy to be about his energy, how he feels, his fear. So it's like, all right, So that's the value. Obviously, it's the director's film. And in the case of working with Jim, it really is his film, and I feel it was quite an accomplishment on 3 films to, for the most part, have his trust. He's not an easy guy to trust someone else because his own intelligence is so out there, and he's usually several steps ahead of everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite an accomplishment. Another composer said to me once, because he knew that he'd worked on 1 film with Jim, and he knew that I'd done 3, and I walked into some composer's thing where there were a bunch of composers around, and he said, wow, dude, you must have balls of steel. You did 3, And I know what he was talking about. And at first I kind of was like, what? And then I got, oh yeah, I did do that, didn't I? That's cool.
All right, so there's one final question here, and it's a good one to end on. Will Full Circle be an audio show, or will it have some footage?
No, it's totally audio. Or yes, it's totally audio.
Yeah.
It really is. My vision is hopefully that people, like they listen to soundtrack albums, that it's a full experience. It's like radio theater is what I would call it. You turn it on, you sit in your chair, you either close your eyes. We did that one visual poster just to give you a sense of, the whole thing isn't dark like that, but that's kind of where the mystery lies. It's kind of in that our visual poster thing. So yes, you are required to put your own imagination out. Somebody listened to it. A friend of mine said, wow, this could be this cool animated, which I'd never thought of. I thought, yeah, I get that. One of those cool, very cool, not a Disney kind of animation, but a really cool, artistic, expressionistic kind of animation would be kind of cool for it. There are some kind of semi-magical elements to what goes on in the story. But yeah, you're on your own. I'm hoping people at least will listen to each act and then, like you were in the theater, take a break between act 1 and act 2 and go get your beer or your chocolates or whatever you want to do. And then come back and listen to 2. It's not really designed to be listened to in little. We're releasing certain song excerpts, but the show as a whole, I think, will work best if people can listen through.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. Thanks, Brad, for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. You've been fun to be with.
Thanks.
Charlie's been disappearing occasionally. Other than that,
I've got technical issues. Okay. I try my best. I try my best.
You're doing good. Get some sun, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I do need some of that sun, yeah, because you've got a lot of sun there, don't you? Look at you.
You know, we have something here called May gray and June gloom, and it means that it's kind of cloudy in the morning. This marine layer, we're not far from the ocean.
Yeah.
A mile away. But yeah, usually by, where am I now? Midday. I'm at a little afternoon here,
Mm-hmm.
and luckily most days it opens up. So yeah.
Well,
All right.
tomorrow I will go out into the sun because Brad Fiedel has told me to get some sun. So
Yeah, but not too much. You know.
Don't get too much.
This cannot get too much. I'm like a vampire. I'll burn.
Speaking of vampire, for those who want to follow me on Facebook,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of requests, and I'm kind of coming up with a little thank you to fans, and we'll be performing something live from Fright Night probably next
Cool.
week.
Awesome. So I'll put all
good.
of your social media in the description of this YouTube video, or if you're watching on, or I guess listening to on Spotify, we'll put all that in the description for you.
Great.
Yeah, and
thank you so much, guys.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you.
Take care. Be safe wherever you are.
You too. Bye bye.
You're getting too much sun.